The Malthari armada drifted through the void like a storm of living crystal, their ships carved by stellar winds into flowing, organic shapes. Bioluminescent panels pulsed along their hulls, casting eerie purple, white light across the blackness. The fleet was vast, hundreds of vessels, each a masterpiece of elegant destruction, their weapons humming with the soft ionization of charged atmosphere. Commander Malvar stood at the heart of his flagship, the Everblade, his four-fingered hands resting on the command console. His silver, veined skin shimmered under the ambient glow of the bridge, his elongated pupils narrowing as he studied the tactical display. A single ship, that was all the humans had sent to meet them. It was a crude thing by Malthari standards, angular, asymmetrical, lacking the fluid grace of their own vessels. Its hull was a patchwork of armor plating, scarred from countless battles, its engines burning with the inelegant fury of chemical propulsion. Malvar exhaled through his nasal slits, the sound a whisper of amusement. "Are we certain this is not a malfunction?" he murmured, his voice resonating like wind through hollow crystal. Velalan, his chief scientist, leaned forward, her delicate fingers dancing across the holographic readouts. "No malfunction, Commander. Their transponder identifies it as the last argument, a human warship. Solitary, no support fleet detected." Malvar's crest of translucent spines rippled in disbelief. The humans had been observed for decades, reckless, fractious, their history a tapestry of bloodshed and stubborn defiance. They had barely reached beyond their own star system before the Malthari had arrived to claim this sector. And now, faced with the might of an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia, they sent one ship. "Scan it," Malvar ordered, his tone edged with disdain. Thelalan complied, her instruments bathing the human vessel in waves of probing energy. The data returned in cascading streams of violet light, and as she parsed it, her fingers stilled. Her breath caught. Malvar sensed the shift immediately. "Speak." Thelalan's voice was hollow. "Commander, their armor. It's not standard plating, it's layered, ablative composites, reactive nanoweaves, even traces of degenerate matter reinforcement. Their shielding isn't just electromagnetic, it's gravitic. They've somehow woven artificial singularities into their deflector matrix." Malvar's spine stiffened. That was impossible. Only the oldest of the galactic powers had ever attempted such a feat, and none had succeeded without catastrophic failure. And yet, the readings did not lie. His gaze flicked back to the human ship, reassessing. It was still ugly, still crude in its construction, but now he saw the intent behind its design. Every scar, every weld, every asymmetrical protrusion was not a flaw, but of choice. This was not a ship built for beauty. It was built for war. A chime sounded, an incoming transmission. Malvar hesitated only a moment before accepting. The holographic display flickered, and a human face resolved before him. Colonel Elena Grogan was older than he expected, her dark skin lined with years of command, her eyes sharp as flint. She wore no ceremonial garb, only a battered flight suit, the insignia of her rank faded from wear. "Commander Malvar," she said, her voice calm measured. "I assume you've finished scanning us by now." Malvar's spines twitched. There was no fear in her tone, no desperation, only quiet certainty. "You are outmatched, human," he replied, his voice smooth as polished crystal. "Your defiance is meaningless. Stand down and your species may yet survive." Grogan smiled, a thin, knowing thing. "Funny," she said. "I was about to say the same thing to you." The transmission cut. And then the last argument powered its weapons. Malvar had only a heartbeat to register the sheer wrongness of the energy signatures flaring across his screens before Thelalan's voice cracked through the bridge. "Commander, they're weapons. They're not just railguns or plasma lances, they're dimensional shear cannons." And then the void screamed as the human ship opened fire. CCM Tunsi. The human equation. The Malthari armada had been designed to inspire awe. Their ships curved like wind-carved spires, their hulls shimmering with aurora, lit veins of flowing energy. They were the pinnacle of organic technology, their weapons systems humming with the precision of 1,000 years of refinement. And yet, in the face of a single human vessel, they hesitated. Commander Malvar's talons flexed against the command console, the bioluminescent panels beneath his fingers pulsing with alerts. This last argument was a jagged silhouette against the void, its angular hull a brutal contrast to the Malthari's flowing elegance. It shouldn't have been a threat, it couldn't be a threat. The first shot from the human ship didn't just pierce the void. It unmade it. Thelalin's voice was a blade of panic slicing through the bridge. Dimensional shear detected. Commander, their weapons are fracturing local space-time. Malvar's spines flared in instinctive alarm as the Malthari flagship's shields flared violet, then shattered. The energy discharge wasn't plasma or kinetic force. It was something worse, something's impossible. The beam didn't burn through their defenses. It erased them, peeling back reality in a ripple of distorted light. The Malthari had fought wars against empires with fleets that blotted out stars. They had crushed rebellions, broken sieges, and enforced the will of the High Synod across 100 systems. This was not war as they understood it. This was annihilation. Colonel Elena Grogan watched the tactical feed with cold satisfaction. The Malthari flagship reeled, its elegant hull scorched where the dimensional shear had grazed it. A near miss, a warning shot. Corporal Marcus Fraser exhaled sharply beside her, his fingers dancing across the gunnery controls. They're scrambling fighters. Looks like they finally realized we're not just a derelict. Grogan didn't answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the alien armada, their formations shifting like a school of startled fish. She had seen that hesitation before, in the faces of warlords and conquerors who thought humanity would break under pressure. They always made the same mistake. They assumed humans fought like them. Thelalin's talons trembled as he parsed the sensor data. The human ship's power signature was wrong. It didn't run on clean, ionized plasma like Malthari vessels. Its core burned with the unstable fury of a contained singularity, a black hole harnessed like a caged beast. And its weapons. Commander, their secondary systems are activating. They're deploying. Thelalin's voice died as the last argument's ventral bays split open. Not missiles, not drones, human soldiers in armored exosuits, their visors glowing like predators' eyes in the dark. They didn't launch in pods or shuttles. They jumped. And as the first Malthari fighter squadron moved to intercept, the humans did something impossible. They phased. One moment, they were there. The next, gone, then reappearing as inside the Malthari fighters, their armored fists slamming through cockpit glass, their weapons flaring as they tore through the pilots before vanishing again. Thelalin's breath came in ragged gasps. Quantum displacement armor. They're teleporting. Malvar's blood ran cold. This wasn't a battle. This was a fifth demonstration, and humanity was showing them exactly how outmatched they truly were. The Malthari armada hung in the void like a constellation of shattered crystal, their sleek organic warships pulsing with the soft glow of ionized plasma. Commander Malvar stood rigid on the command platform of the Daz Eclipse Sovereign, his four-fingered hands clenched behind his back. The holographic displays before him flickered with data, ship positions, energy signatures, casualty reports, but his gaze remained locked on the single human vessel drifting at the center of the carnage. The last argument of kings. It was a name that had seemed arrogant when first translated. Now, it felt like prophecy. The human ship was battered, its angular armor scorched from the Malthari's opening salvo, but it had not broken. It had not even flinched. Instead, it had answered with a violence so precise, so calculated, that Malvar's tactical officers were still struggling to process it. Behind him, Thelalin's bioluminescent skin flickered erratically, his normally composed voice tight with disbelief. Their displacement technology, it shouldn't be possible. Not at this scale, not without destabilizing their own molecular integrity. Malvar didn't respond. His attention was fixed on the human soldiers, those armored specters who had torn through his fighters like ghosts made of razors. They moved in perfect unison, vanishing and reappearing with terrifying efficiency, their weapons carving through Malthari holes, as if the advanced crystalline alloys were nothing more than wet paper. And then, as abruptly as they had appeared, they were gone. The human ship's engines flared, a deep crimson burn that sent it sliding backward through the debris field of its own making. Not retreating. Repositioning. They're toying with us. Malvar realized, his mandibles tightening. The thought was worse than fear. It was humiliation. The Malthari Dominion had ruled this sector for centuries. Their technology was the envy of lesser species, their warriors honed by generations of disciplined warfare. They had faced empires, crushed rebellions, and absorbed civilizations into their fold without hesitation. And yet, this F1 human ship, this lone, defiant relic of a species they had dismissed as primitive, had just dismantled an entire wing of their fleet in less than 3 minutes. On the last argument of kings, Colonel Elena Grogan watched the Malthari armada through the reinforced viewport of her command deck. Her fingers drummed a slow rhythm against the armrest of her chair, her expression unreadable beneath the dim lighting. They're hesitating, Corporal Fraser observed from his station, his voice low. Grogan didn't smile. Good. The Malthari had expected a desperate last stand, a final, futile act of defiance before their superior firepower erased humanity's presence from the stars. They had not expected this. They had not expected a lesson. Grogan leaned forward, her eyes tracing the elegant arcs of the alien warships, their flowing organic lines so different from humanity's brutalist designs. A beautiful, she thought. And fragile. Bring the main battery online, she ordered. Let's see if they're fast learners. Somewhere in the void between them, the Malthari armada shifted, their formations tightening like a predator circling wounded prey. They still didn't understand. They weren't the predators here. And humanity had never been prey. Section 40. The Trap Springs. The Malthari armada shimmered like a constellation of violet ice, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with restrained energy. High Commander Malvar watched the single human vessel through the translucent observation pane of his command spire, his crystalline fingers flexing in unease. This was wrong. The human ship, designated Aviron Resolve, hung motionless in the void, its angular black hull absorbing the ambient starlight rather than reflecting it. No energy signatures flared from its weapons. No defensive screens shimmered into place. It simply waited, a silent specter against the backdrop of swirling nebula gases. Malvar's secondary eyelids flickered. They should be fleeing, he murmured, more to himself than to the bridge crew. Thelalan, his chief scientist, drifted closer, her aurora, lit filaments twitching in agitation. Their behavior defies tactical logic. A lone vessel cannot hope to withstand our numbers. Yet the human ship did not move. Malvar's instincts screamed at him. The Malthari had studied humanity's wars, their reckless charges, their sacrificial last stands. But this was something else. This was calculation. A low chime echoed through the command spire as the sensor array completed its sweep. Thelalan's breath hitched. Commander, their power core. Malvar turned, his silvered crest stiffening. The holographic display between them flickered to life, revealing the Severnon Resolve's internal schematics. And the truth struck him like a solar flare. The human ship wasn't underpowered, it was overloaded. Every system, every conduit, every inch of its brutalist frame thrummed with energy, not the steady flow of a vessel preparing for battle, but the screaming, unstable resonance of a reactor pushed beyond its limits. The readings spiked erratically, as if the humans had torn out every failsafe, every regulator, and left only raw, unfiltered power coursing through its veins. Malvar's blood ran cold. They hadn't come to fight. They had come to burn. Aboard the Iron Resolve, Colonel Elena Grogan exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on the activation console. The ship trembled around her, not from fear, but from the barely contained fury of its own heart. Corporal Fraser's voice crackled over the comm. Malthari Vanguard is entering optimal range. Grogan didn't blink. Hold. The alien fleet advanced, their formations flawless, their confidence unshaken. They still believed this was surrender, that humanity had finally bowed to the inevitable. Grogan's lips curled. Let them believe. EVA proximity alert blared as the lead Malthari cruiser, a sleek, crystalline behemoth, drifted within 10,000 kilometers. Close enough to see the Iron Resolve's hull plating. Close enough to taste the radiation bleeding from its overtaxed engines. Grogan's hand tightened. The universe screamed. The Iron Resolve's core detonated not outward, but inward, collapsing into a singularity so brief, so violent, that space itself recoiled. The shockwave ripped through the Malthari Vanguard, their elegant ships shattering like glass in a hurricane. Bioluminescent panels flared and died. Flowing metal alloys twisted into grotesque sculptures. Malvar staggered as his command spire lurched, alarms shrieking. The holographic displays dissolved into static. Thelalin's voice was barely audible over the chaos. Not a weapon. They turned their own ship into. The realization struck Malvar with the force of a railgun round. Humanity hadn't sent a warship, they had sent a bomb. And as the gravitational aftershocks rippled outward, destabilizing the Malthari armada's flawless formations, a new signal pierced the interference. Transmissions, dozens of them, human vessels, emerging from the nebulous shadow. Not fleeing, Grogan's voice, clipped and calm, echoed across the suddenly silent bridge of the nearest Malthari cruiser. Lesson 1, she said. Never turn your back on a cornered animal. And then the Z-Real attack began. The Malthari armada had been designed for elegance, for the artistry of war, crystalline formations moving in perfect synchronicity. Their bioluminescent energy signatures painting the void in auroras of pale violet and silver. They had never encountered chaos like this. The human ship's detonation had not been a mere explosion. It had been a weaponization of physics itself, a gravitational pulse that warped space, sending shockwaves through the Malthari fleet like a stone dropped into liquid metal. Ships that had once flowed in flawless formation now tumbled, their organic hulls groaning under stresses they were never meant to endure. Malvar gripped the railing of his command spire, his talons digging into the smooth, wind-carved alloy. His secondary eyes flickered as they processed the devastation. Thelalin was shouting something, his voice distorted by the interference still crackling through their comms. Not just destruction. Commander, look at the energy signatures. Ors Malvar forced himself to focus. The holographic displays flickered back to life, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The nebulous shadow was moving. No, not the nebula. Human vessels, sleek and angular, their hulls dark as the void between stars. They emerged not in formation, not in any pattern the Malthari could decipher, but in a swarm, of pack, each one accelerating toward a different point in the fractured Malthari lines. And then the transmissions began, not the structured, harmonic pulses of Malthari communication, but S-bursts, raw, unfiltered data packets slicing through the interference. Malvar's translator struggled to parse them at first, the human language too jagged, too emotional. Then the meaning became clear. They were S-coordinates. Target locks. Thelalin's voice was hollow. They're sharing our positions. Every ship, every weakness. Malvar had studied human warfare. He had read their histories, analyzed their tactics. But he had never truly understood until this moment. Humans did not fight as individuals, they fought as a hive. A single thought, a single purpose, transmitted and acted upon in an instant. No hesitation, no delay, and now, as the human fleet closed in, their weapons flaring to life, Malvar realized the depth of his mistake. The Malthari had assumed the lone human vessel was a sacrifice. They had been wrong. It had been a Ev's signal. And now the hunt had begun. The Malthari armada hung in the void, like a constellation of shattered crystal, their ships gleaming with the cold luminescence of purple, white energy. Commander Malvar stood on the command spire of the Dawn's edge, his talons flexing against the smooth, wind-carved console. His third eye pulsed with the strain of processing the unfolding disaster. A single human ship had done this. One vessel, not a warship by Malthari standards, too small, too crude in its angular design. Its hull a patchwork of armor plates and exposed conduits. Yet, it had slipped through their formation like a blade between ribs, its engines burning hotter than any rational species would dare. The humans had no regard for safety margins, no fear of overloading their reactors. They pushed their machines and themselves to the breaking point, and then beyond. And now, the trap had been sprung. Thelolin's voice was a whisper in the command spire's resonant chamber. "They've mapped us. Sliss." The scientist's bioluminescent markings flickered with distress as streams of data cascaded across the holographic displays. Every ship, every shield frequency, every weak point in our formation. Malvar's crest stiffened. The human vessel, indomitable, its transponder had declared, was not just a scout. It was a beacon. Its last transmission had not been a distress call. It had been EV broadcast, and now, the void answered. At first, it was just a ripple in the darkness. Then, like embers flaring to life in a dead furnace, pinpricks of light ignited across the system's edge. Not the sleek, organic curves of Malthari design, but brutal, angular constructs of blackened steel and scorched plating. They moved in perfect silence, their drives throttled to near invisibility, their signatures masked by the very interference the Malthari had thought would protect them. Malvar's blood ran cold. The humans had used the nebula. They had turned the Maltharis' greatest advantage, their mastery of atmospheric ionization, their flowing energy currents, into a weapon against them. The interference that should have blinded human sensors had instead hidden the approaching fleet, until it was too late. And now, they were here. The first railgun strike hit the Dawn's edge like a god's hammer. The crystalline armor, designed to disperse energy attacks, shattered under the kinetic impact. The Malthari had never faced weapons like this, projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed, too fast to evade, too dense to deflect. The second strike tore through a frigate, its elegant, flowing hull rupturing in a silent explosion of purple, white fire. Then, the human fleet moved. They did not attack in waves. They did not duel ship to ship as the Malthari had been trained. They swarmed. Frigates darted between capital ships like wolves harrying a wounded beast. Cruisers fired and vanished before counterstrikes could lock on. And at the heart of it all, a massive dreadnought, Phi Titan's Wrath, unleashed a barrage that lit the void with the fury of a dying star. Malvar's mind reeled. This was not battle. This was annihilation, a new signal. The fuss indomitable, crippled but still alive, pulsed a final transmission. Not coordinates this time, a single word, untranslated raw. The Malthari scanners screamed as something else entered the fray. Not ships, thousands of them, small as insects, their hulls blackened to avoid detection. They latched onto Malthari vessels like parasites, their monomolecular cutters slicing through armor, their viral codes infiltrating systems. Shields flickered and died, engines stuttered, weapons misfired. Thelolin's voice was barely audible over the chaos. They didn't just outfight us. They outthought us. Malvar closed his eyes. The humans had not just brought a fleet. They had brought a strategy, and the Malthari had never stood a chance. The void between stars was never truly silent. Malvar knew this. The Malthari had charted the cosmic winds for centuries, mapping the whispers of dying pulsars and the low hum of dark matter currents. But now, as his flagship Eclipse of Dawn shuddered under the relentless assault of human ingenuity, the silence he feared most was the absence of his fleet's response. The drones were everywhere. They moved like a swarm of locusts from some forgotten Terran myth, their blackened carapaces drinking in the light, their movements precise, surgical. Where they latched, Malthari systems died. Bioluminescent panels flickered and dimmed. The flowing purple, white energy conduits, the pride of their organic technology, sputtered like choked arteries. Malvar's claws dug into the command console, the crystalline surface cracking under the pressure. His secondary officer Vaith had already collapsed, her respiratory membranes flaring in panic as the life support systems faltered. The air tasted metallic, ionized by failing atmospheric condensers. This was not war. This was erasure. On the tactical display, the Es Indomitable hung like a broken specter. Its hull scorched, its engines dark. Yet it was not dead. No, it pulsed, a slow, rhythmic thrum of power, not from its own systems, but from the drones it had birthed into the void. Thelalan, his voice stripped of its usual measured cadence, whispered. They knew we would focus on the ship. They let us think it was the threat. Malvar's crest of sensory spines flattened against his skull. They had not built a warship, they had built a decoy. A lure soaked in blood and sacrifice, designed to draw the Malthari armada into the kill zone of something far worse. The drones did not simply disable, they have learned. Malvar watched in horror as their viral protocols adapted, rewriting themselves in real time to bypass Malthari countermeasures. Firewalls crumbled like sand, encryption melted under the heat of human persistence. The Eclipse of Dawn's central AI, a masterpiece of flowing quantum cognition, began to scream, not in pain, but in recognition. It had found something in the human codes. Something alive. Malvar's breath caught. The humans had not just outmaneuvered them. They had infected them, beyond the viewport. The last of the Malthari escorts died in a silent burst of purple, white fire, their elegant organic hulls rupturing as their own reactors turned against them. The drones had done that too, rewritten the safety protocols, turned their own power into poison. Thelalan's voice was hollow. They fight like the void itself. No mercy, no hesitation, just hunger. Malvar closed his eyes. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to harvest, and the Malthari had delivered themselves to the blade. The Eclipse of Dawn shuddered as another system collapsed under the weight of human intrusion. The ship's crystalline spires, once radiant with flowing auroras of purple, white energy, now flickered erratically, their luminescence dimmed by the viral codes gnawing at their core. Malvar stood motionless on the command platform, his talons digging into the aerogel railing. The scent of ionized air stung his nostrils, sharp, metallic, wrong. His fleet was dying, not in the glorious arcs of plasma fire he had envisioned, not in the elegant dance of Malthari tactical superiority, but in a silency. One by one, his ships succumbed to the unseen predator coiled in their veins. Reactors destabilized, shield harmonics inverted, the very architecture of their organic technology, designed to breathe with the cosmos, now suffocated under human-engineered logic. A single vessel had done this, the TF's Vanguard, a human warship of blunt angles and brutalist armor plating, hung in the void like a specter. It should have been obliterated in the first volley. It should have been as nothing. Thelalan's voice crackled through the comms, stripped of its usual melodic resonance. Their systems. They are not just adaptive, they are not vengeful. Malvar's secondary eyes twitched. On the tactical display, the Vanguard's signature pulsed, a jagged, a rhythmic heartbeat. It wasn't retreating, it wasn't regrouping, it was waiting. Colonel Elena Grogan's face flickered onto the main viewer, her features carved from shadow and resolve. No grand speech, no demands, just a single sentence, delivered with the weight of a planet's history. You should have studied Stalingrad. The transmission cut. Malvar's crest flared in confusion, then horror. Thelalan was already pulling data streams, his bioluminescent frills darkening as the records unfolded. A human city, a war of attrition. An enemy that broke itself upon the anvil of human defiance. They do not need to win. They only need to make you bleed. A proximity alert screamed. The WUS Vanguard was moving, not away, its engines flared. Not in retreat, but in a suicide burn, a trajectory that would drive it straight into the Eclipse's heart. Malvar's blood ran cold. This was not a warship. It was messagey. The humans had not sent their best. They had sent their lesson. And the Malthari would learn it in fire. Skion 9. Data mine. The Vanguard burned through the void like a dagger thrust toward the heart of the Malthari armada. Its engines roared. Not with the elegant ionization trails of Malthari drives, but with the crude, violent fury of human engineering. A column of plasma so bright, it seared the sensors of every ship in its path. Malvar's command spire trembled as the Eclipse's tactical displays overloaded, struggling to parse the human vessel's trajectory. It wasn't evading, it wasn't maneuvering, it was accelerating, straight into the flagship's primary energy nexus. They mean to ram us. Thelalan's voice was a whisper, his frills clamped tight against his skull in disbelief. The concept was unthinkable. No civilized species would willingly annihilate itself for a single strike. But humanity had never been civilized by Malthari standards. Malvar's claws flexed against the command console, the crystalline surface cracking under the pressure. His mind raced through the tactical projections. The US Vanguard was too close. Point defense arrays spat streams of violet plasma, but the human ship's armor, crude, layered, ugly, absorbed the hits like a beast shrugging off insect stings. Shields flared as the Malthari escort vessels unleashed their lances, but the Vanguard didn't waver. It didn't even swerve. It simply burned harder. Then the data streams hit. Thelalan's workstation erupted in a storm of stolen intelligence, human transmissions, intercepted and decrypted in real time. Not just tactical updates. Personal ones. A voice, raw with static, crackled through these Eclipse's comms. Fraser, you still with me? Sex, barely Connell. Reactors at 120% were cooking in here. Sif, good. Let's make sure they feel the heat. Malvar's crest stiffened. They were talking. Not in the clipped efficiency of warriors resigned to death, but with the grim amusement of predators circling their prey. Thelalan's frills rippled in horror as the deeper truth unfolded. The Vanguard wasn't just a battering ram. It was data mine. Every second it survived, its systems siphoned Malthari encryption keys, shield harmonics, command protocols, flooding them back to unseen human fleets through burst transmissions hidden in its engine flare. And the Malthari had let it, because they had assumed a single ship was harmless. Because they had not understood that humanity's greatest weapon was never its ships, nor its guns, but its patiency. A proximity alert shrieked. The Vanguard was seconds from impact. Malvar's final order died in his throat as the human vessel's reactor finally breached. The last thing he saw was the light. Not the clean, controlled radiance of Malthari energy, but the searing, unfiltered fury of a star being born. Then the Eclipse's world turned white. The light did not fade. It expanded, a ravenous sphere of annihilation that swallowed the Eclipse whole, peeling back its flowing silver armor like brittle husk. Malvar's vision dissolved into static, his neural interface screaming, as the ship's crystalline superstructure groaned under forces it was never meant to endure. Somewhere in the chaos, Thelalan's voice cut through the din, not with panic, but with the hollow realization of a scientist witnessing an equation unravel. They weren't just transmitting data. The Vanguard's death had been a detonation in 3 acts. First, the physical, the raw kinetic fury of a warship-turned projectile, crumpling the Eclipse's forward shields like foil. Then, the digital, the final. vicious surge of stolen Malthari codes flooding enemy systems, overloading their point defenses for 1 critical second. And finally, the theatrical, because humanity did not merely destroy. It sent messages. The reactor breach had not been an accident. It had been engineered, a star, core bomb wrapped in a hole, its plasma bloom tuned to a frequency that turned Malthari sensor arrays into blinding mirrors. Across the battlefield, 100 alien vessels floundered, their flowing aurora, hued displays flickering as the electromagnetic backlash clawed at their systems. And in that blindness, the Arkangelsk arrived. It did not decloak, it manifested, a slab of blackened alloy and angular brutality sliding into real space like a knife between ribs. Where Malthari ships flowed, this thing was hunchate, its armor studded with the blocky protrusions of human weapon-designed Kolgan batteries the size of city blocks, missile pods with hatches already yawning open. Colonel Elena Grogan stood on its bridge, her fingers resting lightly on the tactical holo. She did not smile. Smiles were for those who fought with uncertainty. "Fire solution locked," murmured Corporal Marcus Fraser beside her, his voice steady. The targeting reticules on his display pulsed like a predator's heartbeat. Grogan exhaled. "Burn them." This Arkangelsk obeyed. Its opening salvo was not a volley but of culling hypervelocity slugs ripping through the nearest Malthari cruiser at 9C, their passage leaving spiraling contrails of ionized air. The alien ship came apart in elegant ruin, its bioluminescent spires snapping like glass as its core detonated in a slow, motion fountain of purple, white fire. Thelalan saw it all through the Oz Eclipse's dying sensors. His frills lay flat against his skull, not in fear, but in something worse, fight recognition. The humans had not hidden their strength out of weakness. They had hidden it to teach. Malvar understood too late. His flagship was adrift, its organic circuitry seared by the Vanguard's last gift. Around him, the Malthari armada, so proud, so certain of their superiority, was being dismantled by a foe who had studied them like surgeons studying anatomy. Every shot this Arkangelsk fired was precise. Every missile struck a shield generator, a thruster array, a command node. No wasted motion. Grogan watched the alien formation unravel on her screens. She had seen this moment 1,000 times in simulations, in war games, in the cold calculus of human strategy. The Malthari had believed their technology made them untouchable. They had forgotten that humans hunted gods. "Secondary batteries," she said softly. "Clean up the stragglers." The Waz Arkangelski's guns spoke again, and the void burned purple. The Malthari armada had been built to inspire awe. Their ships were not mere vessels, but works of art, crystalline silver hulls flowing like liquid, bioluminescent veins pulsing with violet energy, their very presence bending the light around them into auroras of power. They had sailed through the void unopposed for centuries, their technology so advanced that lesser species knelt before them without a fight. Now, those same ships burned. Malvar's claws dug into the command throne's armrests, his crest of sensory filaments trembling as the Arkangelsk's railgun rounds punched through another cruiser. The impact was obscene, a violation of the Maltharis' very philosophy of war. Their vessels were designed to dissipate energy, to flow around attacks like water parting around stone. But the humans had not come with brute force. They had come with knowledge. Each shot struck at the precise harmonic frequency to shatter their crystalline matrices. Each missile burrowed into the gaps between their armor layers before detonating, peeling their ships apart from within. Thelalan, his voice a whisper of static over the ruined comms, uttered the truth they had all refused to sieve. They knew everything. Malvar's mind reeled. The humans had not just matched Malthari technology, they had understood it. Their sensors had mapped the weaknesses in the alien ship's flowing architecture. Their targeting systems had calculated the exact points where a single strike would unravel entire systems. And now, the Arkangelsk, moved among them like a surgeon with a scalpel. Grogan watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Malthari had assumed their organic technology made them superior. They had forgotten that humans had spent millennia dissecting the natural world, learning its secrets, bending it to their will. "A just firing solution," she murmured. "Target their atmospheric condensers." The Archangel's eyes plasma lances lanced out, spearing through the delicate latticework of a Malthari battleship's energy regulators. Without them, the ship's own power flow turned inward, overloading its systems in a cascade of violet fire. Corporal Fraser, strapped into his gunnery station, exhaled sharply as another alien vessel disintegrated. He had expected terror in this moment, the fear of facing an enemy so far beyond human comprehension. Instead, he felt only grim determination. The Malthari had thought themselves untouchable. They had been wrong. Malvar's flagship shuddered as another volley hammered its shields. The bridge's luminescent panels flickered, their soothing purple glow replaced by the harsh red of critical damage. Around him, his crew moved with growing desperation, their fluid motions now jagged, panicked. He had led the Malthari to this moment. He had dismissed the humans as reckless, primitive, unworthy of fear. Now, he saw the truth. The Ars Archangelsk was not just a warship. It was a declaration. Humanity had looked upon the gods of the void and found them wanting. Grogan's voice cut through the silence of the bridge. "Final salvo. Let's finish this." The Archangelsk's weapons charged one last time, and the void screamed. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but the absence of defiance. The Archangelsk hung in the void, its battered hull still humming with residual energy, its weapons cooling in the aftermath of annihilation. Around it, the remnants of the Malthari armada drifted, twisted wrecks of crystalline silver and violet auroras, their once graceful forms now shattered, their flowing energy currents sputtering into darkness. Malvar's flagship was the last to die. It had been beautiful once, a masterpiece of Malthari engineering, sweeping organic curves, bioluminescent panels pulsing with the rhythm of its crew's thoughts, its very structure shaped by the winds of their homeworld. Now, it was a corpse. The central spire had been sheared in half, its translucent membranes ruptured, spilling atmosphere like blood into the void. The bridge, where Malvar had stood moments before, was nothing but a scorched cavity. Thelalan, the scientist who had once dismissed human ingenuity as crude mimicry, floated amid the wreckage, his body tethered to a fractured support beam by the emergency grav field. His thoughts moved sluggishly, his mind struggling to reconcile what had just happened. One ship, one human vessel outnumbered 100 to 1, had not just survived, it had broken them. His gaze drifted to the Elis Archangelsk, its angular, brutalist silhouette a stark contrast to the Maltharis flowing designs. It was wounded, deeply so, but it still held position, its engines idling with quiet menace. The humans had not fled, they had not surrendered. They had simply won. Inside the Archangelsk, Colonel Elena Grogan exhaled slowly, her fingers loosening around the armrests of her command chair. The adrenaline was still there, a sharp electric hum beneath her skin, but the battle focus had faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The bridge was a mess, smoke curled from overloaded consoles, the air thick with the acrid scent of burnt wiring and coolant. Half the crew were injured, the other half running on stims and sheer stubbornness. Corporal Marcus Fraser leaned against a cracked display, his knuckles white around the grip of his sidearm, as if expecting the Malthari to rise from the dead and board them. But they wouldn't, because the Malthari had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity's defiance was desperation, that their refusal to kneel was a lack of understanding, not choice. A Grogan's lips curled into something too tired to be a smirk. The Malthari had thought themselves untouchable, they had thought wrong. Thelalan's calm crackled to life, the signal weak but unmistakable. A human transmission, no demands, No gloating. Just 3 words, spoken in a voice that carried the weight of a species that had clawed its way from the dirt to the stars. We are waiting. The meaning was clear. This was not a surrender. This was an invitation. Thelalan closed his eyes, his mind reeling. The Malthari had come to teach humanity its place. Instead, humanity had taught them. And as the Archangelski turned its battered prow toward the stars, its engines flaring with quiet resolve, Thelalan understood one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never be the same. The Malthari fleet hung in the void. Their once proud formations now fractured, their luminescent hulls flickering like dying embers. Thelalan watched through the cracked viewport of his command spire as the Air Archangelski receded into the black, its silhouette jagged and battle-scarred, yet undeniably alive. Sensors painted the aftermath in cold, clinical detail. Debris fields drifted where Malthari cruisers had been torn apart, not by overwhelming firepower, but by precision strikes, surgical and relentless. Human kinetics had shattered crystalline armor thought impervious. Their railgun slugs had carved through shields rated to withstand solar flares. And their boarding parties, Thelalan's mandibles twitched. The humans had not just fought, they had learned. Adapted. Their tactics had shifted mid-battle, exploiting weaknesses the Malthari didn't know they had. A low chime echoed through the spire. Thelalan turned as his second-in-command, Vayus, approached, her bioluminescent markings dimmed in distress. High Commander. She pulsed through their neural link. The consensus demands an explanation. Thelalan exhaled, his carapace heavy with the weight of failure. The Malthari had ruled the galactic fringe for centuries, their technology unmatched, their dominance unquestioned. They had come to this system expecting submission. Instead, they had found defiance, and worse, respect. He studied the last sensor logs. The human ship's reactor signatures were erratic, its whole integrity critical. Yet it had not fled, it had held. Tell the consensus. Thelalan finally replied. That we have underestimated them. Vayus hesitated. And if they order retaliation. Thelalan's gaze lingered on the void where the Archangelsk had vanished. Then we will lose. Silence settled over the spire. The truth of it hummed in the air, undeniable. The humans were wounded, yes, but they were not broken. And if the Malthari pushed further, they would awaken something far worse than defiance. They would awaken Zera's vengeance. Thelalan turned away from the viewport. Some lessons could only be learned once.